Last year, in January 2023, I finally left my trusty little old banger behind and ventured into the world of electric. I traded in my petrol Hyundai i10 for a self-charging hybrid Renault Clio e-tech. And I'm here to give you the honest lowdown as to whether jumping from petrol to hybrid is worth it. On this video, I'm going to touch on two things: drive quality and running costs. First up, drive quality. Before I start talking about how nice it is to finally have a new car for the first time in my life, I feel like I have to talk about my little red Hyundai i10. I have to give a bucket load of credit and appreciation to that car, because let me tell you, it may not look the part, but that car is the four-wheeled equivalent of a Nokia 3310. I am not kidding. That car was so reliable. It was also super cheap to run and super cheap to maintain. Full tank of petrol, 30 quid. Road tax, 30 quid. New tyre, 30 quid. Whole new engine, 30 quid. That's why I was so reluctant to get a new car for so long, because this car was so cheap to run and so reliable. But it was about 15 years old and it was getting to that point where things needed replacing on it more and more often, and I just thought, you know what, I'm gonna treat myself. I really wanted a fully electric car, but A, they're expensive as hell, B, I live in a small town surrounded by countryside. There aren't a great deal of charging spots around here, so I figured I'd go for hybrid for the time being whilst the local infrastructure catches up. So after a lot of research and test driving, I settled on a brand new Renault Clio e-tech self-charging hybrid. And honestly, I'm so glad I went with the Clio. I actually adore this car. I've never been a car person in my life. You know when you see those people driving really fancy cars down the street and everyone stops and turns to look at them? I'm that person who is looking in the opposite direction. I have no idea whatsoever and no interest whatsoever. But in terms of general comfort, drive quality, and all-round driving experience, out of all the cars I've ever driven and test driven in my life, both petrol and hybrid, this car was 1000% a winner. It drives like silk. It feels like you're floating. It's crazy. It's so nice. My partner drives a Mercedes and even he prefers my Clio. It's won him over. I may have loved the sturdiness of my little Hyundai i10, but honestly, the general feel of driving a hybrid is no comparison. So let's talk running costs. Is it actually cheaper to run a hybrid than it is to run a petrol car? And what is the price difference? I looked at my mileage and my fuel costs over the last 2 years, comparing 2022 when I drove my petrol car and 2023 when I drove my hybrid car. Over both years, my mileage was extremely similar. I drove about 8,000 miles in the year. About 6,000 to 7,000 of them were business miles, 1,000 to 2,000 were personal miles. As part of my business, I do longer journeys. I'm often on the motorway. For my personal mileage, I pretty much just drive into town and back, so it's all short trips. I wouldn't say there's really any difference in the types of journeys I did across both years. I think that was pretty consistent. Now, spending wise, obviously there will be a few influential factors at play here, such as increases and decreases in fuel costs, the age of the cars, the engine size. My Hyundai was a 1.2, my Renault Clio is a 1.6 litre engine, the weight of the cars, etc. But both cars are pretty similar in size. They're both small hatchbacks. The Clio is a little bit bigger. I always tend to fill up at the same local petrol stations rather than expensive motorway service stations. And my driving style hasn't really changed over the years. I drive very sensibly. So I'm not saying that this is going to be a completely faultless, 100% fair experiment. But from my experience, this is what my fuel costs have looked like over both years. In 2022, when I was driving my petrol car, I spent just over £1,100 on petrol. I paid a visit to the petrol station 39 times. That equates to me needing to fill my car up 3.25 times a month. And to clarify, usually when I go to the petrol station, I fill up the full tank. I don't usually just spend a tenner. In 2023, when driving my hybrid, I spent just under £650 on petrol. And I filled up at the petrol station on 20 occasions, which is the equivalent of filling up only 1.6 times a month. So, I spent nearly 50% less on fuel annually by driving the hybrid. And being that it's a self-charging hybrid, I didn't have any additional electric costs either. So that is the total running cost. Since I've started driving the new car, I've been really keen to see how it compares to my last car in terms of running costs. Because I've always wanted a hybrid or an electric, and I've always been told that they're more cost effective to run, but I didn't have much of an idea of what to expect comparison-wise. I couldn't really find any hard figures comparing the two. I think in my head I was aiming to halve my fuel bills, but in reality I had no idea what to expect. It could have only worked out 10% cheaper or 20% cheaper. So when I worked out my final spending figures and mileage, I was over the moon. And I'm really glad that for a car that is half petrol and half electric, I am only paying for half the petrol. So overall conclusion, to me, as someone who isn't a car person, I just feel really delighted that my own personal goal of halving my fuel costs was actually met. I know it wasn't a completely fair, unbiased experiment, but I could never make an entirely unbiased experiment. I can't control the petrol prices, I can't control the condition of the roads I drive on. I just wanted to exist as I normally do and see if my choice of car achieved my personal goals. And it did. And I just wanted to share that with you in case there's anybody else out there who is weighing up petrol versus hybrid at the moment. I hope this helps somewhat in your decision-making process. Thank you for watching. See you soon. Bye!